everyone, I'm Grandmaster Denes Boros, and we're going to discuss a fun little topic tonight. And this topic is winning on demand. Winning on demand, and that's probably the toughest one among the players. They hate it. They also kind of find some excitement in that. Now, what's fascinating in it, I have to mention, is that Grishchuk, who is a big time trouble addict, so he likes to spend his time and then get into huge time trouble, and then plays on increments literally, most of the tournaments and even recent ones. I actually don't recall him getting in situations where he had to win on demand. Now, chess is a tricky world because that could mean two things. It could mean he's so good he never needed to win on demand, or the opposite, obviously. These are the two options. But it's very interesting to me that he never really got into, or I don't remember a situation where he had to. Now, we're kind of on that topic, and I do want to segue a little bit in toxicity in chess, because I think these high emotional stakes get the worst out of people, and that's, I think, how it kind of relates here. And what I'd say is winning on demand is tough, but is an essential element in general. Because whenever people try to become a grandmaster, an international master, you have to make norms. You have an X amount of points you need to get, and sometimes it's on the razor's edge. You need to score 1.5 out of 2, so it's what it is. Now, the other thing that I wanted to say, though, and that might actually help clarify what I mean, why Grishchuk might not need this. It might be because of the tension he brings into his games. So he plays the game so there is a constant pressure going on. Now that pressure cooker might accidentally, or not so accidentally, cook the opponent instead of him, because he's always in pressure of time, and the opponents feel like, well, I got to play on his time now. Therefore, he might actually win a lot of games before he's actually forced to win games. So he's actually putting a lot of pressure early. Now, people are not talking in the chat about this total thing, this total tournament. I don't know if it's going to be a total success or total failure, but one of them for sure. Have any of you heard of this new attempt for a tournament called Total something? I can't quite. Total Chess, yeah?
Total Chess World Championship.
Yes. Well, it's still like beta testing the tournament. I wouldn't really call it like a real one. They, in fact, call it like an experimental version. It was also a little bit strange, to be honest with you, because they had qualifiers, and accidentally the young kids are left out of that tournament. There are a couple of them, but most of these things are based on ratings and the Rapid and Blitz. So there are obviously some legit ones, but also plenty of young and talented kids, including Eric Geisy, conspicuously missing from the field. So it really honestly feels more like a closed event than an event where you can qualify into. And honestly, I feel one of the things that we are missing in the chess world is the opportunity to qualify and get to play other players and top players. And especially with these young 20-somethings and early 30s, they definitely would need the experience, including Aravind, Murzin, and in some sense Erigaisi too. There's a lot of potential in them, but if they never get the chance to play the big guys. So I don't actually favor these closed events or closed events that are open in name only. And the reason why I don't favor them is that the best tournaments are those where you actually get some fresh blood flowing and some excitement. Chad's been like completely preoccupied with things being boring, but talking about and coming back to our main topic, not everything's boring and you can spice it up, especially in situations that are dire. You have to win. In fact, this first game, Lputian versus Tukmakov, both of them are legendary players, but Tukmakov was very strong and finished second behind Karpov in one of the championships, meaning Soviet championships. Lputian is also a very strong Armenian grandmaster. Now, this was played in a KO event. KO events are interesting, and you'll see why. But on the other hand, they're also fairly unfair, and they're very punishing. So, talking about being punishing, Tukmakov lost the first game with white, therefore he has to win with black. So before I get into my spiel, what do you guys think? What do you all think online? What would you do if you must win with black? Yes, sir? French? Well, I've got bad news for you. White is not going to play 1e4. Yes, go ahead.
My own opening.
Your own opening. Very surprising. They might not expect all your games to be exactly the same when you play in a knockout event. Very clever. Okay, so we've got the Benko, we've got the Kid, we've got the Dutch or some advertisement, I don't know. So, Kid for the 80s?
What about the King's Indian?
Kid is actually like the shortened version of the King's Indian, yeah.
I would look at my opponent's games and see what they score the worst in.
Okay, so you check the opponent, see what they scored. Where's that? Okay. Now, one of the things, and the most interesting part of this, and like this gets incredibly psychological, everyone gets affected. So, even if you try to pretend that this is going to be a normal game, this is not going to be a normal game. Because your opponent also understands the weight of them being in an incredibly good position, of playing the white pieces, and also just only needing a draw. Therefore, for example, I've even seen a Hikaru game where he was playing white, and there's actually almost like 0.01% that doesn't give bishop b5 check in this position when they have the draw odds. Which is actually fascinating of how little people can restrain themselves from the excitement. When it could actually still be that d4 is a better choice. In fact, I told this to Nakamura on one of the streams. He played bishop b5 and got into trouble. But I said, well, why don't you just go d4 and then just go bishop g5? And one of the interesting things here is that, like, and it's somewhat paradoxical, is that, well, this is a very sharp opening. Yes, that is true. Well, which can lead to the poisoned pawn. But it also kind of gets into a situation where Black will have to walk a thin line to stay alive, and oftentimes it boils into something very evenish or drawish. Black, in some sense, will be obliged to do something out of ordinary or something second rate to keep the game going. So in that sense, going for bishop g5 paradoxically is not completely a bad decision for white. It at first blink makes no sense. Why are you taking the complications? But this is sort of like a game of chicken, and they will have to blink. I mean, otherwise they just lose out. And I do remember that I think he actually tried it. He did try to play this way. If I remember correctly, he was quite successful. Okay. But, surprise, surprise, white went d4. So no more stuff like that. Yes, go ahead.
Still e6.
I mean, okay, so even if you go pawn e6, you can quite will your opponent into the French. They can still just say no. Okay, that's not the right no. This kind of no.
b6?
Okay, b6 is still not a French. But you could try to get something, but you do give away a lot of the center. Yes, go ahead.
This is where I play my customized opening.
Mm.
Not b6, I play c6.
Yeah, I mean, it is a line and can get sharp, but white does get a huge center. I would go as far as this being somewhat on the suspicious side. Now, I'm not actually saying that suspicious is necessarily off the table. So black actually went c5, d5, and played the move Yasser will remember, and fondly. Here black plays a move that is very rarely played, if ever. b5 is not like you are actually missing this and get the Banco stuff going. You can't quite do the same thing without the knight there because white is going to go e4. And that actually is a hint. White is going to go e4, and Tukmakov is like, no e4. You're a bit late for de Blumenfeld. And also it's very risky. You give up a pawn, and I'm not sure you're going to see it back. f5, yes. Now there's a reason I mentioned Yasser. Yasser actually faced this against Mamedyarov and won a beautiful game, which is a topic for a later occasion. But this one is an interesting choice for the situation where he has to win the game. Now, f5 is risky. But why do we think f5 is somewhat on the sketchy side? Why is this somewhat not perfect? Imperfect, to say the least. e4 is a pawn sacrifice, but why would e4 really come as an idea? Yeah, exactly, and many issues in the Death Valley of chess. That's correct. Prophylaxis, that's correct. Dutch, any other openings, whenever that diagonal opens up, your king is exposed. But e4 is a difficult move to make when you're up a whole point. You only need a draw. Why would you give away a pawn and then just hope that everything's going to go well? So white actually refuses to do that. But So this is kind of that thing where you could kind of tell how tournament situations affect the player. They might even know this is the move you must play, but they just refuse to do so on the principle that they're too scared, or we assume they just don't want to give up the pawn. Why risk it? However, Blank's play is not completely nonsense. White moved the pawn deep inside, but it doesn't really have a lot of support. And yes, you have a pawn here, but I do control the e4 square. And what's even more important is that controlling squares matter most. You don't actually have to have the pawn in there. So in some sense, from a strategical perspective, the situation is unbalanced and things are happening. So that did not happen. Knight c3 happened. Knight f6, bishop g5, queen b6. Black does not want to ruin their structure, which is quite important because if that gets jumbled up, it's very easy just to lock up the position. So takes, queen takes naturally, e3. Okay, so you look at this position, and you still kind of have to decide whether you're going to see a lot of direct contact in fighting or a slower game. What do you guys think? Which one are we going to witness? Everything's going to be indirect. That's absolutely correct. Now, if things are going to get indirect, it means you kind of want to go for crucial and critical squares. So you've got a lot of time to maneuver around, and you absolutely should. So at first glance, we could mention e4 as like a critical square, but that is kind of out of reach, especially for our knight, because the pawn is in the way, the queen's in the way. So you can maneuver, but I would say that proper maneuvering is like 3 moves. 5 moves is still a lot of moves, even in a close position. You can, but they might actually open up the position on you. You could also go g6. Sure. Now, but if I explicitly mention key squares, what other key square we might find apart from e4? d4? Well, d4 unfortunately is occupied by white, so it's not actually going to be easy to get there. Like, we might get there later in the long run, but something that's not even contested at the moment. e5, of course, very good. This square on e5. Now, chess is a tricky game. If you go pawn e5, you accomplish your goal of occupying the e5 square. However, you open up everything. Also, they go en passant. You must take. You cannot give white this square. And everyone's favorite check, and we trade everything off, and white wins, and we lose the match. So e5 is a sound idea. Unfortunately, they trade us. But that actually shouldn't really make you feel that, oh, then the idea is off the table. That actually should encourage you to look further. It should actually be helping you, nudge you in the direction, okay, I can't use the pawn, but is there something else I could do and use in this position instead of it? Hmm? Well, queen is the option, but remember, you've got time. You've got time to move around. Yeah, go ahead.
We don't like everyone's favorite check, so how about we go a6?
You could go a6. Now, I'm a little bit over dramatizing. You can go a6, but let's say I go a4. I'm more curious about your plan. a6 is fine, and a lot of the times, yeah, go ahead, sorry. I'm listening, actually. Yes?
Then we could go e5 now without the worries of him trading absolutely everything.
Okay. Okay. All right, that's smart. You could do that. However, we're going to get a little bit even more conservative. So you don't even want a trade of pawns, if possible. But all that said, I do like your idea, and then actually makes a lot of sense. So we want to occupy that square, but with a piece. D6 and get the knight there. Now Tukmakov does this without playing a6, and I will explain. I know that the big question is, but bishop b5 check. And that's obviously a relevant question, but I'll answer. Knight d7, knight e5, you get the knight to e5. And notice that this is exactly 3 moves, lucky numbers. That's just enough time that it's not too long. And it is still taking some time. Now he does g6, but even with d6, if check, king f7 is, at first blink, looks incredibly ridiculous, but in reality is incredibly logical. If this was obviously a Sicilian, we'd think you've gone mad walking around with your king like that. But this is not a Sicilian. This is sort of like a Dutch Benoni hybrid. So sort of a hybrid system. And there's no way you can get to my king because the position's locked up. And you don't really have a knight to jump around and harass the king. And even if you do, I can just move it away. And the funny thing is, the one piece that looks ridiculous here is the bishop on b5, because the only thing it did, it was just a check. That's it. And now we can do your a6, just chasing it away, or even just completely ignoring it, if we feel like it. And also note that white is not much ahead with their pieces. There's plenty of them still in the garage, with the rook on h1 and knight on g1. And a bishop on b5 doesn't really do much. Yeah, that is a nice little king walk there. So he goes g6 first, bishop c4, d6. Now, I've seen moves like this, and just like movies, mixed reviews for this bishop move. And I'd say it is more reasonable than it looks. And I do think that it is okay to say mixed reviews because your bishop is sort of cornered and is just staring at the wall. However, you double, triple, quadruple defend the pawn on d5, and defending your stuff is never really a huge mistake. on the other hand, it's not the happiest spot for the bishop.
Yeah, it's protect if there's something. It's
Yeah.
that's been protected double.
Yeah, but it's not a bad idea. There is always some sense in overprotecting. Talking about movie reviews, I have to say I've been kind of upset with one of my friends. He's like, oh, like he has this Leo DiCaprio mindset. Is like, it has to be a recent movie, otherwise this can't be good. And it's like, dude, even from 2020 to 2025, it doesn't compete with A Godfather, Once Upon a Time in the West, or let's say No Country for Old Men, and they're not recent movies. So it's not all about when it was made, whether it is quality. So in some sense it relates to chess too. Yeah, white already has a couple of pieces out there, but it doesn't make them good. So black is behind and is responding to all these ideas of white, but that's an advantage because we already can decide that when we jump to e5, it makes already way more sense because it's going to hit the bishop on c4, right? You wouldn't even necessarily go there if the bishop is not on c4. So sometimes the older the better. So d6, knight e2, knight d7, case in point, knight is incoming. Knight f4, knight e5, queen e2. If check, obviously you ignore. Because one thing that I didn't talk about long enough, but I should have, even if white ever gets that knight to e6, you just take it, like, okay, I'm just going to make a different move. Yeah, just to show it. You always capture. In this case, you can already win the pawn, but sometimes you can even ignore it. And this bishop just doesn't have a way to attack your king. This is like a typical Dutch setup. And the whole point is, just like in French defense positions, the bishop doesn't have a goal. It just exists. And that's actually one of those things you want to accomplish. Now, this is like high strategical mastery, when you actually can give your opponent a bishop that doesn't have any targets, compared to ours, which clearly hits a target. It's all opened up, and you might even open up even more with f4, d5, d4. So in some sense, black has the more opportunities. Okay, so knight f4, knight e5, queen e2. And again, black's next move is pretty cool. Black is not winning this position, and shouldn't be, because it's the middle game. Should never feel game is over if there's still a bunch of pieces on the board. There will be a lot of changes. In fact, one of the downside of Grishchuk's chess, and I do have to mention that because I guess it relates, is that even if you figure out a position with that little time, it can transform into a third type of position, and you already have no time to figure that out. Therefore, it's not necessarily the best way of playing chess. However, we've got time here. You got lucky, dear Chatterino. And our big question is, how should we deal with our own bishops? Lucky us might already kind of chose where they're going to station their pieces. Someone's asking if it's me. It is me. Yes, it's Denes. Yeah, go ahead.
Are we interested in going a6, preparing for b5, and then going bishop b7?
A6 is interesting. However, I'm concerned with your development. I don't mind a6, but whenever you start pushing pawns, you have to mind your development a lot. I usually prefer to do that first and then go with a6, b5. Used to watch my streams? Well, technically this is also a stream, right, Ben?
Well, yes, we're live.
We are live.
I can't believe it.
You can't believe it? Well, me neither. But yeah, so what we're trying to figure out is how to position them bishops. I look like MVL. That's incorrect. MVL looks like me. Bad move ordering. Really? Giving up on any of the bishop moves?
I'm stumped.
Really? I mean, you literally have about 4 legal moves.
I was fixed on the a6, b5.
Okay, so I'm going to help you. So you're fixed on a6. I will stop you from making the b5 move. Then what are you going to do? All right, we're getting somewhere. All right. Where is that white bishop going? First, we got to worry with our own bishops. No white bishop slender till then.
Bishop d7 now, they won't allow anyone to go bishop d5?
Bishop d7.
They're spending time.
Yeah, but so if we go bishop d7 now, we probably are going to face what some people call doom. Because now we can't trade this bishop for the knight. And now this knight is an octopus. And that's going to be painful. Now you could do it with the a6, a4, bishop d7 for sure. Now, yeah, bishop h6 and was played by Tukmakov. Very, very good move. Yes.
I thought we didn't want to trade pieces.
We're not going to trade it. We're threatening it. I know that's actually one of the confusing things about chess is that we are not necessarily trade something, we're threatening it. So the threat is greater than the execution. I'm pretty sure they hit you with this one a million times. No? Yeah, good.
If he castles queenside per se, wouldn't we just swipe the knight off the board?
So the thing is that you will trade when you feel it is the right time. You don't have to do it immediately, especially because it's a close position. Does that answer you?
I mean, I feel like the knight didn't have much going for it in the meantime.
Yeah, but so one of the reasons Tukmakov puts the bishop there is more of keeping white in check of what they're doing than actually threatening to take the knight. For example, so if white goes something like knight e6, takes, I mean, I don't even need to take, but I could take. Yeah, maybe, yeah. Yeah, we want to avoid those forks. Yeah, you can also just ignore it. And it might, this actually is way smarter Because here I can take, and do win the pawn.
Because why don't the bishop on h6? Because if it's on g7 and you're trying to avoid trading pieces, just take the
It's a
bishop.
great point by Nick. If you put the bishop here, I can't actually trade your bishop off. And so what really you want to do in the position, and this again comes back to the winning on demand stuff. He's actually playing better moves. He is forced to play better moves than just your average bishop g7 because there could be more trades. They trade off everything. He can't win the game. So bishop h6 keeps more pieces on the board. Yes?
Is our goal also to pass the next move, or are we still fixed on our white square position?
No, we can cast like. No, castling is fine. You don't have to do. You don't have to do things. You do whatever, seems correct to you. And I actually agree with you. Castling is what should be played first, so you don't run into this idea. And I'm not like. Don't misunderstand me. You could have played a6 earlier. I don't claim a6 is any shape or form inferior to bishop h6. If anyone is judgmental, those are computers, and also they don't want to judge you. They're just forced to. It's just the nature of the game. So h4, castles, you're not going to get mated. They don't have a dark squared bishop. So h4 is more of guarding the g5 square. So we can't just push. And you really don't want to push it. Like you don't really want to push that because it doesn't improve your position much and there will be a lot of issues for you. So you just want to sort of start focusing on the other side. So now he takes the other bishop, b6, g3, a6. So we could sort of transpose to what you wanted. Very close to that. And the reason why Tukmakov waited, he kind of wanted to see White's plan. When he went pawn a2 to a4, he was like, snap, I take your bishop before the bishop runs away. He takes b6, a6. And I would definitely say that Black accomplished his goal. He was like, okay, I want a game where it's not like an immediate draw. You can't trade everything off. And it's very dynamic. Black has a pair of bishops. Black has a pair of knights. So if you care about the principles of chess, you rightfully would tell me, hey man, it's a close position. They got a pair of knights. It's just like a pair of bishops in open positions. But I'm very sorry to disappoint you. Nothing is like a pair of bishops. A pair of bishops are like a pair of bishops. Maybe a pair of aces, but it's a different game. Yeah? Okay, so you might be wondering, okay, this doesn't make sense what you're saying here, and I can empathize with you. But the reason the bishop pair is so good, that eventually, for one reason, they work very well together, and the game might just open up eventually. So they kind of have like a potential for the later part of the game. Why would White? Yes, good.
I know we don't want to trade, but I really want to do e5.
Yeah, so the thing is, we kind of need to have a little bit of a read on the position first. So, and especially with close positions, understanding of what's happening is way more important than just getting into action immediately. But Eski did ask a question, and I do want to respond to that. Why would White play for a draw from the start? Human? The humans have emotions? I'm sorry, I don't know. That's just the way it goes. humans sometimes can't help it. Now, this wasn't just a knockout event. There was obviously prestige, glory, lots of bags filled with goods if they win. So it wasn't like they were just playing for fun. There also was a lot of things online, so I was like on the line here, and they wanted to get that money, to put it plain and simple. And if you don't win it, then you don't win it. So like, there's a lot of tension. It's not just an online game where you will spam 15 more until, the cheaters outnumber you. So, but coming back to your question, let's kind of talk about the game and mostly the pawn structure of it all. And I think it's kind of crucial here. What sort of weaknesses stand out in White's position? Yes?
If we go b5, he cannot take us back with this pawn because that beat is wrong.
There's some tactical tricks looming in the air, that's correct. But that's a bit of the dynamic part of what you're looking for there. And I'm looking more of the static, unmoving parts.
The d5 pawn is artificially isolated.
Yes, this d5 pawn is an unofficial weakness and unofficially isolated. I like that term. Thank you, Nick.
The piece can be trouble all game.
Yes, the king, actually, all those light squares are loose for White. So that's an issue that White might be facing, not now, not in 2 moves, not in 3 moves, in a lot of moves. The other thing, so let's say if we're going to entertain the idea of e5. First of all, we would be trading off their not so good pawn. Second of all, apart from this knight being semi-useful of controlling a square, which we would always capture, and that's, again, kind of ties back with the idea, trade off your opponent's best piece if they go there. But is this other knight doing anything less here? Does that other knight on c3 have a goal to reach? No, it's completely useless, right? Now, if you actually, we're going to entertain your ideas, like let's say takes, just so we can go e5, or whatever, like it doesn't, the move order doesn't really matter that much. e5 takes. Now you suddenly gave this knight a potential place to go to. To be fair, you can win a pawn, but notice that I might even consider sacrificing the pawn, because his pieces sort of come alive that weren't really participating much or being useful at all. Yes?
Yeah, it's when,
Or just here.
when he goes knight there,
Uh-huh.
then we'll eat his pawn, but then he'll move his knight on to c7 check. We move our king, and all of a sudden we lost the bishop. But
Well, actually, like, I know what you're trying to say, but here, actually, you're still winning with King F7.
yes, because we have to focus on our work.
I mean, you hit the queen, the knight. It's a classic triple attack, so we're just going to win that one. But the thing is that, like, your idea is not wrong. The timing is a bit early. So if you would be a little bit more patient, as you'll see from Tukmakov, he's going to capitalize it later on when the time is right and the price is right. So a6, castles, bishop d7, knight e6. He doesn't even take because he's not forced to. Rook b1, king f7, knight f4, rook b7, and now anytime and later on, black could go and play pawn b5, and it probably is a good move, but you sort of have to kind of understand that there's still a little bit of bargaining going on of, do I want to show my cards this early? Showing that b5 is my intention. Because white is sort of running out of intelligent moves. By intelligent moves, I mean white goes rook b1. If you go back, your computer is just going to say, what are you looking at? What is this death stare from you? But us humans, we have this emotion called shame, and we like to see that our moves make sense. And if they don't, we just feel funny. So in that sense, rook b7 is the sort of move that improves your position and doesn't give your opponent a plan while you're doing your own. And chess is part of playing on the chessboard and playing on these dynamics that is sort of outside the chessboard and the psychology of the two players. And that's actually one of the reasons why you don't want to hyper-focus on computers a lot of the times, because they don't get this. It's not in the it's not baked in that that's an important info, that you're not going to show stuff. Which is actually interesting. Like in many other, like I mentioned, card games, even card games, they just stick with like numbers of the probability of this happening, but they never really play with the psychology of like, well, maybe this is like a better strategy from it's a smarter move from a human perspective, because you're kind of psyching out your opponent. And that's what Tukmakov is doing. He's psyching out white. So queen d3, it's already kind of like a knee-jerk reaction. Bishop g7, rook c8, really just shuffling. Kind of like everyday shuffling. Like, I'm not going to give much commentary to this because they don't change much. Gonna sort of get there, and now suddenly things are happening. Black decides to sort of hint at the idea of g5, and maybe he goes for an attack. White immediately says, no go, no thank you. And it's actually a very good move. Anticipating your opponent's play is never a bad idea. And here, Tukmakov does somewhat of a speculative decision, but a good one. He needs to win, and he spotted that he can win a pawn soon, and he does. And the bishop takes c3, bishop takes a4. And now we get a situation where the table sort of turns, and this happens way more often than mentioned. The one who's trying to make a draw is forced to be the more combative player. And more often than not, or at least a lot of the time, people don't actually feel comfortable changing. So this is where the hunter gets hunted type of situation. They ought to be hunting now, but he's not ready. He thought that he's just going to defend successfully, and that's it. So if you're the hunter, dear viewer, and everyone over here, what do you think is the most appropriate way of going aggro for white? I mean, it's white to move. That's kind of sort of what I mean, that white needs to do something even though they don't expect to be doing anything. Hello. Hello there, chat. E4, and that would have been the better move. So actually very natural And, this immediately would kind of wrong foot black, because if you have to go back like this, that can't be that great. And e4 will set up h5 ideas, maybe even e5. I would assume, well, tensions are running high at this moment, like they're not hours in. And I kind of, e4 feels natural to me as well. And there's actually a thing to say about this. Natural moves are usually pretty good in a normal position. But Lputian becomes very creative with g4, but g4 is definitely what Tukmakov is looking forward to, because they're opening everything in front of that king, which, is a good sign. Bishop b5, indeed, chasing the queen away, taking on g4 and king h7. And even though, you've got this structure, but your king is sort of getting very breezy over here. That's why I would prefer e4 too, just so you keep your structure. Rook h3, rook g8, knight e6, queen f5. And probably the idea that Lputian missed, we hit the queen, we hit the pawn, and we're also up a pawn. So suddenly things are collapsing for white. Takes, king f3. And I do ask, how would you, people, try to strengthen our position? Yes, go ahead.
Bishop goes to f8. I mean to
F1?
f1.
Yeah, I go rook g3. So yeah, bishop f1 is very aggressive, but maybe you could still improve your position a little bit before you do that. Yeah, rook g4, rook g1. I like either of them. Rook g4, very good. Was in fact played. And you're just involving the other rook. And that's kind of the joy of like these close positions. Bishop d7 is also fine. Is that you don't need to rush. You've got the time. Knight f4, yes.
Are we still interested in trading? Not interested in trading as in it would ruin the...
No, we'd love to trade as black.
Because
We're ahead, yes.
yeah.
Now, and so we're interested because we're ahead, and we're interested because the structure. So that's why actually sort of the skeleton of the game, the pawn structure, is so critical. There are cases when you are favored just by the fact that the pawn on d5 is isolated, and it's an easy target. Like even like they mentioned the French earlier, and people were mentioning the French. Pawn structures there for black are often better, and that's why they kind of like the endings there. Yes?
I like how we got our rook on g4
Uh-huh.
because now we involve our a8 rook.
Uh-huh.
Also, we're pinning his rook to the h file so that otherwise we win his pawn. But
Yeah.
now we have support on getting our bishop to c4 in order to
Mhm.
get his pawn there.
Mm-hmm.
The king has no flight squares.
Yeah.
He tries to push the pawns for control.
Yeah. I mean, they still be able to go knight f4, and I think it'll happen too. But yeah, these moves are very strong, especially because they restrict the opponent. And that's an incredibly important way of playing chess. If you can restrict the play, this is probably a better move in a position. Still have to look for tricks and traps, because sometimes people like enticing you to a good-looking move that just loses to a trick. Never trust your opponents. They don't want you to win. So bishop d7, a5. Very nice, methodical, making sure the square is covered. c4, king g7. We've got time. We don't mind trades anymore. E5. It's a beautiful little geometrical idea. Yes, go ahead.
So,
Yeah. Bishop c6. You take this pawn. So this, like, there is a saying, if you put your pieces on a good square, they're going to be grateful. If your rook wasn't on g4, this whole idea of rook takes c4 wouldn't work. And now, practically, the whole position collapses because we also win the e-pawn. We take this. Can't really take that one because of rook b4, and I pick this. And then you also run into that. Yes, go ahead.
what happened to h4? How come we don't take it?
Well, because you first eliminate those tricks. Like, you first kind of get rid of the dangerous pawns. These side pawns, they don't actually worth that much. In this case, yeah, go ahead.
Then why did he move his king? Why did he form this?
Well, it's a check.
Yeah, can we go back?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Forward twice, please. Now why did he check us instead?
But there's also knight
He
f6.
moved his king.
It's pinned.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a pin. These guys are good. They're not going to fall for knight f6 check. I promise you that. So rook takes e6. And by the way, just a side note, as the game and the lecture is sort of winding down, as Black is on the verge of winning and is going to win very soon. There is one thing, and that's something to look up. I'm not sure if there's like a database on it, but the value of a center pawn and the value of a rook pawn is not the same. So as far as I know, it's like this center pawn is worth like 1.1. This one is worth like 0.45. Not quite sure exactly, but I've seen some databases talk about this. So this is really my homework to all of you, everyone here in person and everyone watching and on YouTube. This is your homework. I want this in the comments section, giving me all the details. Peer-reviewed articles only. Okay, I'm kidding. But, you know, respectable sites, people, respectable sites. But there is definitely, I've seen some material that deals with like the side pawns are not actually equal to pawns in the middle. So you want to win them, obviously. They become stronger when they become a passed pawn. But otherwise, they're not as high value. Yes?
So are you suggesting that later we're trying to get a c2? It cannot move his rook back because then we traded it with the knight, so we'll move his king. Then he eat his b2 pawn instead of taking the h4.
Yeah, so if you take the b pawn, I mean, even, you know, I'm just going to entertain what you're saying. So let's say check, here it takes. Can't go here because you lose the piece. Here it takes. Even if you just look at it, look at these swarm of pawns, there is no competition there anymore. So they're just going to start rolling and it's unstoppable. Now, if you win this pawn, these pawns are not unstoppable anymore. It'll take time till you trade it or somehow get rid of that pawn. And this h pawn, it's kind of like an iffy situation. Yes, technically, it's your passed pawn, but it's also sheltering your king. So you may want to think about it twice, especially with the knight jumping around, if you want to push it that much further, because your king is going to get much weaker. So it'll be a completely different thing. Like if my king would be on the other side of the board, this pawn might be more valuable. So it does depend on the situation. In this specific situation, winning a pawn here is a million times more valuable than the other one. But if it's a passed pawn, like, we're actually not picky when it comes to free pawns. We take the lowest of the low value H pawn or side pawn if we get the chance. But as far as I know, and even in this case, because we've got passers on that side and they're really, really strong and they're connected, it's actually more valuable. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So let's see, the game did not last much longer. He did take the pawn, I told you. If he doesn't get a chance to win this one, then he's going to win the other one. It might not actually be necessarily a bad idea to take the knight if you feel threatened, but probably he just didn't want to have this f-pawn in danger. And it's very easy to mess up in chess because white rooks are so strong, the black king would get in some danger, and it's not rook endings, it's very easy to actually mess up and turn into a draw. So he doesn't take it because the bishop is strong anyways. Knight f4, rook f6, king c3. Probably time ran out, but I mean, black is going to win a pawn, start pushing those pawns. In any case, white resigned, maybe a little prematurely, I'd say so. It's not like you should resign this early. I'm not quite sure. It could have been time too. So, but black is objectively winning. Black has a lot of pawns that he's going to be able to run down. The f2 is weak. The king is not ideal. So not every resignation is dubious. And so I'm going to say something controversial, which I don't do quite enough, so I apologize. Sometimes, especially with double rounds, like 2 games a day, if you're like losing and it's hopeless, your energy is not infinite. So if you know that you're gonna, you're down a rook, you're down a piece, if there's like one last trick left, you want to try that one last trick. But it's not necessarily a smart idea to try to hold something that you're going to lose when you could have like 3 hours instead of 1 hour left for your next game. You don't have infinite energy. You might think so right now. Trust me, it's not infinite. You've watched any athletics, you know it's not infinite. Even them are gasping for oxygen. In any case, I really hope you enjoyed this lecture, and thank you for coming. Thank you.